So today we begin a new chapter, and it's the fourth chapter, and it deals with the levushim. Levushim is the garments of the neshama. So it will be very hard to recap from the very beginning how we got to the garments of the neshama, but especially from the second chapter, the third chapter, which deals with the godly soul, neshama nefesh elikis, and then if you remember in the third chapter, one of the things we established, Alter Rebbe doesn't deal with the Torah mitzvahs dimension of the neshama, rather the performance of Torah mitzvahs of the neshama. It dealt with the neshama, the experience of the neshama itself. Why? Again, we elaborated on this in the last class. Why so? Because the Torah mitzvahs, a person, just like the neshama up in Gan Eden, cannot perform Torah mitzvahs. So too, if you look at it from the perspective of the neshama itself, the neshama, without investing in the garments, we're going to soon see what the garments are, why they're called garments, etc. Before it invests in the garments, which on the overall thought, speech, and action, it can't perform a mitzvah because it doesn't have maisa, it doesn't have action, it can't put on tefillin, it doesn't have dibur, it can't utter the words of Torah. So the third chapter deals with more the soul experience on its own. And what's the soul and the makeup of the soul itself prior to its investing in its garments. And that is associated with the Gimel Meichin, which is the intellectual dimension of the neshama, how it has the ability to understand, perceive, intellectualize godliness, ungodliness, and then how it has this godly emotional experience, maybe chesed, gvura, love, fear, etc., whatever. However, the Alter Rebbe deals with in the third chapter, and the Alter Rebbe also speaks about the different types of ideas which the neshama ignites. In other words, the way the neshama, the different ideas of lukus, of godliness, which the neshama invests its intellect in, and as such, as it perceives the different ideas. If you remember the Savav Kalam, the Malu Kalam, the Kula Kamei Kala Chashiv, and that's how it arouses with fear and love. And again, he deals with all the other five. He points out how the other five attributes are associated with the first two, which is Chesed and Gvura. But one thing is in common. One thing we see over here, that in the third chapter, the Alter Rebbe doesn't deal with the neshama, how it gets involved into the garments of thought, speech, and action. In other words, there's a certain similarity with the third chapter, the way the neshama is completely divested from the body. When it's just in Gan Eden, there's no association with actual thought, speech, and action of Torah mitzvahs. It's all a soul experience, because that's the makeup of the soul. It's divided into, it has the ability to understand godliness, and has the constant experience, or as a result, it produces an experience of emotional connection to God. In the chapter 4, after all, we're talking about the neshama, the way it's invested in this world. So we have to know, before we deal with the neshama investing in the three garments of thought, speech, and action, we have to know what the makeup of the neshama is on its own, and that's what the whole third chapter is devoted to. The fourth chapter, if you notice, va'oid means additional to the way the makeup of the neshama itself. Again, the way it's divided and categorized, compartmentalized into cognitive and emotional faculties. It has va'oid, additional to that, l'chol nefesh elikis, the way the neshama deals with the way the neshama deals with the vessels, the containers to which it performs Torah mitzvahs. What are the vessels? And again, in this case, it's not containers, it's not vessels, it's garments. What are the garments that the neshama has to enter in order to perform Torah mitzvahs? So he says, this is thought, speech, and action. So we'll read the first few lines. Additional to the neshama itself, to the makeup of the neshama itself, the nefesh elikis has shleisha levushim, three garments. This is where we begin tonight. Now, the idea of a garment, even as we mentioned a few times, even in the way human convention dictates also, we present ourselves with garments. There's the person himself, and then there's the garments of the person. The person himself is who he is, but no one leaves the garments behind. We present ourselves with garments to the outside for ourselves. Garments contribute to the person's self-esteem, makes him feel good, look good, and then the way we interact with the outside as well. Similarly, the neshama also has garments. What are the garments of the neshama? Thought, speech, and action. Shel taryag mitzvah Torah, but because we're dealing with the garments of the neshama, so it's associated with the 613 mitzvahs of the Torah. Now, why are these called garments? Just a very basic, elemental information over here. Why, or explanation rather, why they're called garments. If you think we want to define the difference of a garment and the person himself, let's look at the human being. A garment is something that you can change in a minute, in a second, a few seconds. If I'm wearing a black jacket, I want to put on a red jacket. What does it take me to do? I could change it to a red jacket. If I'm wearing a white shirt, and I could put on a blue shirt within seconds, and vice versa. Similarly, if I have a dirty garment and I want to change to a clean garment, also within seconds. What if I have a stained hand, and it's not, you're not talking about external dirt. Something is wrong, chas v'sholem, with someone's hand. You can't just go and just change your hand. Your hand is part of you. Even with today's technology, they could deduct a little bit skin and different. We're blessed with incredible new developments. We shouldn't know of this need, but there's no question that there's still no comparison. Whatever technology and science has contributed to our comforts and to our reality, you can never compare the changing of a garment to the changing of a person's limb and organ. You can never compare, because this is internal, and you on its own you really can't change. If somebody has a problem with his hand, you can't change, go just change a hand, because this is part of you. A garment is very close to your hand, right? It's your jacket, it's on you. So it's very close to you, but in this, as much as it's close to you, and it fits your hand, and it fits your body, and it fits you, but it's close. In other words, it's physically close proximity to your body, but you can change it 1, 2, 3, from dirty to clean to dirty, and so on. In the nimshul, in other words, what we're dealing with the neshama. When you're dealing with the neshama itself, if a neshama has a strong feeling to God, it's not something that it could be changed from one minute to the other. A feeling is not easy to change. You're like something, you love something. It's not easy to say, to stop that. You understand something, that's what you understand. You can't change it from one second to another. You have a feeling to something, it could fade away, it could come back, it could strengthen itself, it could be weaker, but it's not easy that you can't just go ahead and change it. Similarly, feeling of fear. If you fear something, you really usually always fear it if it's something worthwhile to fear. If you're talking about the context of God, again, when you speak about God, it's not fearing like from something scary. It's more in the context of reverence, right? Hashem. If a person has a clear understanding of Hashem and it's on his mind, it couldn't become more intensified, less intensified, weaker, stronger, but it's usually there. It's not something you can change in a minute. A midah, a character, an emotion, an emotional experience, you cannot change in minute to minute. A mitzvah, and that's why, again, for that reason, they're called garments. I'm learning Torah, so I'm involved in learning Torah. If I stop learning Torah in that moment, I'm not learning Torah anymore. There's no such thing now. While the Torah I learned, it could be in my knowledge, I still have the knowledge, but the mitzvah of learning Torah stops the moment I have, in other words, I have the ability to learn, and I stop learning, it's off me. It's that garment of Torah is off me. And vice versa. If I have the opportunity to learn and I'm not learning, it's kind of like a unclean garment, or it's not an appropriate garment because I could learn, or I'm not wearing a garment, I could put on the garment of learning Torah. I could start learning in a moment. I'm putting on the tefillin, I could stop putting on the tefillin, or not to put on tefillin. It takes literally a second. You involve the mitzvah, you're not involved in the mitzvah. You're doing the mitzvah, you're not doing the mitzvah. How long does it take? A second. And similarly in speech. I'm speaking chas v'sholem lashon hara. Bad thing indeed. It's like an unclean garment. It's a stained garment. It's worse than a stained garment. It's associated with speech, associated with sin. For me to change that, in other words, to change that dirty shirt into a clean shirt, how long does it take me to stop speaking lashon hara and start speaking lashon tov? In other words, good, productive words. 1 second. It takes 1 second for me to change. And chas v'sholom the other way around. Someone's saying words of kedusha to say chas v'sholom words. And similarly, when I'm speaking something positive, which I'm allowed to think, I'm permitted to think, it's a good thing. In other words, it's productive, or thoughts which are going to bring to positive productivity. That's a good thing. For chas v'sholom to change to something which is inappropriate to think, which we know thought plays a strong role in our avodas Hashem. Starting from the Losas, Torah says clearly there's thoughts which are prohibited to think. A person's not allowed to entertain his mind with things which are prohibited. And if I'm thinking of something no good, and to jump to something good, let's look at it from negative to positive. How long does it take? It takes a split second. That's why anything which is associated with Torah mitzvahs, or thought, speech, and action, that's why they're called garments. The hand, something internal you can change. A garment you can change from one second to the other. So therefore it's divided. There's Perek Gimel, which is the makeup of the neshama itself. The ability to perceive godliness, it's something, this is a part of the neshama itself. The emotional experience with God is part of the neshama itself. Yesh v'oid, when it starts getting involved in Torah mitzvahs, which is the thought, speech, and action, they're called garments. Why? Because everything which is associated with machshava, so it's with thoughts, and again in associated with Torah, Dibur was associated with Torah mitzvahs, and Ma'aseh associated with Torah mitzvahs, are called garments because they could come on and off in a moment. So that's the basic explanation why they're called garments. There's other explanation, but we'll keep with this because this is something which it's a clear-cut explanation. And something internal, an internal organ, you cannot. It's not something which you can change. Not something you can move around. And something external, like a garment, you can. So this is also another. And now there's a neshama. Is this an important part of the neshama? Would you say it's just external because it's just a garment? We're going to soon see they're not external at all. For that matter, the garment, in a sense, has a certain advantage in virtue, even over the neshama. We will find out. We cannot apply it to men because it's an example to the parable we will give. We gave before, because no one's going to ever say that the garments of a person are more valuable than the person itself. One thing we do see, in other words, someone loses his garments, he's still alive. It's not a normal life, it's a shameful life, and so on. But he could, someone gives him garments, he could right away put it on and live a normal life and interact with society and so on. But in the context of the neshama, we're going to soon see how the garments of the neshama, because it's connected to Torah mitzvahs, and only through the garments of the person can connect to Torah mitzvahs, they have a greater advantage of the neshama itself from a certain perspective and point of view. Because ultimately, what is Torah? When you say that neshama gets involved with Torah, Torah is practically God. You know, we're just coming from Shavuos. Anoch, Anochi, Hashem Elekech. Hashem says, I myself. Anon Nafshi K'sav Yos. Anochi is an acronym of Aleph Nun Chof Yud. Hashem says, I place myself in the Torah. You open a Mishnah, you learn the Mishnah. That is the closest connection a person can get to God, even more than Gan Eden. More than the highest levels of Gan Eden, because it says there they have Nen and Miziv Ashchin. I'm just saying a few points which he's going to point out later, not to elaborate much, but in Gan Eden they only benefit from the ray of the Shechina, not the Shechina itself, not the divine presence, not the essence of God. The essence of God is not a piece of Gemara, a Mishnah, Tanya, Torah. Similarly in the mitzvah, when one connects to God, when it puts on tefillin, mitzvah is called connection. He's connecting himself to the essence of God. So because a person cannot connect to Torah mitzvahs, not engage in the learning of Torah, and not engage in the performance of mitzvahs without his garments, so here there's a certain virtue and advantage of the garments of the neshama itself. Similar like the neshama in Gan Eden is lofty and the nice, the most the pleasurable experiences the neshama has is in Gan Eden. The neshama does not get closer. The only way the neshama can get close to or become one with the essence of God is only when it invests in the body, because only by the body can it perform Torah mitzvahs. So similarly, when you're dealing with the neshama, even the neshama down here, the neshama itself in chapter 3, it's a very pleasurable experience. One could really go through all these different insights which the Alter Rebbe explains us and really develop a true fear and love to Him. We're talking about a true fear and love to Hashem. It's an incredible experience. But the neshama's involvement in Torah mitzvahs is only via these garments. So again, in the parable, the garments definitely contribute to man's ability to interact with society. It brings him esteem. We quoted the Gemara, I think, the other day. Rabbi Yechanan called his maneh, which means his garments, he called mechabdusa. He called it, they add honor to me. A person dresses well, he feels good. It brings him a lot of esteem, maybe even honor. It definitely contributes, but you don't see the absolute virtue of garments over the person himself. The person himself is the healthy person. That's the main thing. In here, in this context, because only via the garments that the person engaged in Torah mitzvahs, is a certain advantage of the garments, even the neshama. So he says this is the garments machshava dibur ma'isa of the Teryagmin Satera. Shekisha Adam Mekayim b'ma'isa. So here it breaks it down. He says Shekisha Adam Mekayim b'ma'isa. Called mitzvahs ma'isi is when he fulfills with his power, the neshama power of action. All the mitzvahs associated with action, Ubedibur, and with speech, and with the speech, he's involved in explaining, in other words, in learning all the 613 mitzvahs and its particular halachas which associated with these mitzvahs, again because we know that speech as well plays an important role in our connection to Hashem. It's not only action. It's important we make a bracha, we use our speech. In this case, he's not saying the bracha. He says, for example, we learn Torah. The right way of learning Torah, the Gemara says, Chaim heim l'meitzi'eim bepeh. We ought to verbalize the word of Torah, not only understand it. Some people take a Gemara and sometimes we do have to, stop before we go on to understand what he says, and then you say it over. But the real way of learning Torah is to speak the words of Torah. So speech plays an important role in Torah mitzvah, in the connection of the Jew to Hashem via Torah. In this case, he says B'dibur, he gets involved in explaining again all the 613 mitzvahs and its halachas, and in machshavo, and in thought. Where does thought play a role? So we spoke before about the importance of keeping a clean thought. But here he speaks about the positive dimension of, in other words, the mitzvah say dimension of the thought, the way the thought connects leads to Hashem. Where is it in the field, in the Torah mitzvahs? Umasig, that ability to perceive, kol mashaf lahasig the pardes HaTorah, everything that he's able to perceive in the pardes HaTorah. Pardes literally means an orchard. But you'll notice that here he's saying an abbreviation between the Dal and the Sam, is abbreviation marks, but because Pardes is an acronym of Pshat, Remez, Drush, Sod. Because we know there's different levels in Torah. There's the Pshat of Torah, the simple meaning. There's the Remez, the hints of Torah. The Drush, which is the Drash. We find a Medrash, which again, it's a different world other than the Pshat, the simple meaning, and then the Sod, which is the secrets of Torah. And exists the esoteric part of Torah, the Zohar, Kabbalah, Chassidus. It's the secrets of Torah. So we are obligated, for that matter, if you look in Hilchos Talmud Torah, a person has to learn Kol HaTorah Kol. A person we know that we can never be sufficient with one level of Torah and say, well, that's what I'm learning, and that's it. A person has to get involved, try to know every part of Torah, the simple meaning, the hidden part of Torah, the drush, the medrash, and so to the secrets of Torah. It's a obligation incumbent of every yid to learn every part of Torah. So when he speaks about the machshava, the thought process, the perception of the neshama, the way it perceives, it connects rather to God through its ability to perceive, to think, he right away encompasses all levels of Torah, the Pardes HaTorah, in the orchard, meaning in all the Pshat, the Remez, the Drush of Torah, the Drush of Sod Torah. He doesn't know in none of them, because again, it's incumbent of every yid when he learns Torah to perceive every level of Torah. So again, when you're dealing with the machshava, where does thought, as one of the garments of the neshama, play a role in its connection to Torah, to God, via Torah mitzvahs? The ability to perceive the Torah, in other words, to perceive have an understanding of Torah, because we know that's a very important part of Torah. To open a Gemara and just read through the Gemara without understanding what you're saying, you're not really learning. Not really. There's no mitzvah. You're not keep fulfilling the mitzvah of learning Gemara when you open a Gemara and you don't know what it says, or you open a Chumash, you don't know what it says. But we see Gemara, many people just have their quotas, which is a good thing naturally. Very important thing for that matter. Look how many people are learning Torah because of the shiurim, their quotas. But if you think about the Torah on its own, the mitzvah of learning Torah is to understand Torah. It's not just to read it, to go through another page. The mitzvah of learning Torah, to the extent that a person opens up a Gemara and he read from top to bottom and he didn't understand what he was saying, he does not fulfill the mitzvah of learning Torah. Did you know that? Mitzvah person doesn't learn. He could learn a whole page, and he read it rather, without knowing what it says. Looks good, but he doesn't fulfill the mitzvah. The only exception, the Gemara says, it's brought in halacha, that the only exception that a person could fulfill the mitzvah without knowing what he's saying, his Torah should be ksav, is the written Torah. Where do we see it? When someone gets an aliyah, he says Baruch Hu Hashem Avayidach. He says Baruch Hashem Ata Hashem Elokeinu. He makes a bracha on the Torah, and not necessarily many people don't understand when you get on aliyah the portion of the Torah what you're reading. How could you make a bracha on that? The answer is because there is halachically an exception to the written Torah, that even though you lo yoda my kamer, even though you don't know what you're saying, you could still make a bracha on the written Torah. But in the oral Torah, starting from the Mishnah, the Gemara, if you don't know what you're reading, you're not allowed to make a bracha on that, because you're not fulfilling the mitzvah. Limud HaTorah has to be limud, has to be under thought. I was once by he was giving me a class, and the people of the class, they were going to, I think it was like a daf or something they were doing, which again, if you think about the daf, how much limud Torah brought into the world, it's amazing. But this was a particular, it was a class of, I wasn't so surprised, but I was surprised how everybody together responded in the same way. We were speaking about this halacha that learning Torah has to be, you have to understand what you're learning. And they were all part of this Daf HaYomi, and they said, "Are you sure?" And two of them, 2 out of 4, they said, and the other 2 also, they were pretty honest. The others said, we don't, most of the stuff we learn, we don't understand. So we follow, but we don't understand. You mean to say we're not doing the mitzvah? I said, first of all, you're doing maybe a mitzvah that you're sitting in a place where people are learning Torah and you're not out in the street and they're doing trouble. But so it's important, the Gemara says that a person doesn't do an Aveda, is already doing a mitzvah. That's one thing. But you're dealing with the mitzvah of learning Torah, there's no mitzvah to read Gemara. There's a mitzvah, in other words, to the mitzvah of Limud HaTorah, you don't get 50% of it if you just read it and you don't understand what you're saying. Learning ought to be learning. You have to understand what you're saying. So therefore, again, to the exception of Teresh Miksav, it was kind of news to them, but this is the halacha across the board. Learning Teresh Bapeh, you're not allowed to make a Gemara if you're a bracha on Teresh Bapeh if you don't understand what you're learning, because limud is limud. That's why limud means studying, learning has to be understanding. You have to understand what you're learning. Therefore, it's not only when the Alter Rebbe deals with the 3 garments, it's not only the dibur, which is the speech, he says machshava, because one has to understand everything. In other words, every part of Torah which he learns, he has to understand. So machshava plays an important role in our connection to Hashem via Torah mitzvahs. And in this case, in the learning Torah. So we spoke about before that where machshava, thought plays a role on the negative side. Many means we mean on the negative associated with the Torah is divided, mitzvah is divided with the positive mitzvahs and the negative mitzvahs. Negative mitzvahs are things we're not allowed to do. So, when you think about machshava, we said before that there's certain things the Torah prohibits us, and the Torah says certain things you're not allowed entertaining your mind with. You have to be careful to keep a clean mind. So this is on the negative side. In other words, you're not allowed speaking lashon hara. You're not allowed doing any action which is inappropriate. So those are the machshava, the biru ma'isa, which thought, speech, and action, which one has to be careful with to maintain, to make sure they're clean. In this case, the Alter Rebbe speaks in the positive, in the mitzvah say, doing a mitzvah, speaking words of Torah, and thought. There is a mitzvah to understand Torah. In that way, I take the garment of thought and I invest it in understanding a piece of Gemara, or that the Alter Rebbe is careful, because we mention this again. I will mention this again. A person has to learn kol Torah kol. He cannot say I'm remaining with a particular part of Torah. Look in Hilchas Talmud Torah. A person has to engage in every part of Torah. In this case, pshat, remesh, drus, sod. It's the first time the Alter Rebbe introduces the mitzvah of thought, machshava, in his association with the connection with the yid through Torah. He says pardes, all 3 for pshat, remesh, drus, sod. So that's the way the person uses his thoughts in his connection to Hashem via Torah. Hare, when he does that, so klolos taryag evari nafshei melubashim taryag mitzvah Torah. All the 613 limbs of his nefesh are invested in the 613 mitzvahs of the Torah. Now the question is, we just said 3. We just said it's investment of 3 garments. How do I invest my 3 garments? My mind, my speech, and my action. Where do we have 613 limbs investing in 613 mitzvahs? The answer is, let's go back to the example. When you're dealing with a person which he wears, he's dressed, right? A person wears a jacket. Wherever he goes, that jacket is going, that shirt is going, those gloves are going, his pants are going, whatever the person's wearing, his shoes are going. Wherever he goes, that's where they're going. There's no such a thing that says, well, because this jacket is only on part of me. So it's really just. So it's really, in other words, it's not going to move wherever I go because it's just covering a certain part of me. The answer is, where you're going, your jacket's going. And what are you? You are comprised of 613 limbs and organs. And Gidin also, the 248 limbs and organs, and then we have 368 Gidin. So because the person is comprised with these 613, so wherever he goes, wherever he maneuvers, his garments are going with him. Similarly, when the neshama invests via the three garments in his thought, speech, and action, so which part of the neshama is encompassed in the 613 mitzvahs? Every part of the neshama. Because he invested garments, again, because just like you put on your garment, the garment goes wherever you go, so too the person invests his neshama in the three garments, which is thought, speech, and action, and with this he connects the Torah mitzvahs. And how many mitzvahs are there? 613. So there's not one part of the neshama which remains out of this connection. Because if the garments, right? Garments go where you go. If the garments are invested in the 613 Torah mitzvahs in the Torah, so to every part of the neshama is invested in Torah. So look how much the garments contribute to the neshama. The neshama, without these three garments, machshava, dibur, ma'aseh, it has an incredible emotional attachment and experience, with a pleasurable experience. Maybe intellectual experience, maybe emotional experience, everything will be dealt with in the third chapter. But every part of the neshama is divested. There's no connection to Torah mitzvahs. Every single part of the 613 mitzvahs has 13 parts of the neshama. Every single part of the neshama is separate from God via Torah mitzvahs. We cannot connect to God any other way other than Torah mitzvahs. So when we spoke about the neshama, for example, in the third chapter, and we say how this is. We didn't start speaking about the neshama's investment in Torah mitzvahs. It's not just like a little bit here and a little bit there. The neshama in Perek Gimel is similar to the neshama in Gan Eden. It's a wonderful experience, but nothing of it, not half of its limbs, half of its organs, half of the neshama. We're not talking about physical limbs and organs. This neshama is also divided to 613, but none of that neshama is invested into Torah mitzvahs. It's when it invests in the thought, speech, and action. So that's when it's invested in all of it, right? Wherever you go, I'm just repeating this. Wherever you go, your garments are going with you. All of the neshama, through its investment in these three garments of thought, speech, and action, the whole neshama right now is invested in Torah mitzvahs. Is that a great investment? It's a very, very, very great investment. It's a special investment. That's why it's so important that we're getting the understanding. What the Rebbe is going to say so clear. We're getting to the point, rather, how the Rebbe is going to point out that different than the person himself, in the example we give, the garment will always remain inferior to the person. When it comes to the neshama's investment in its garments, it's a very, very great virtue for the neshama, and it takes it to a total different level, because only this way does it connect with God. So we're going to see over here a little bit, and the Rebbe is going to show us how, and break it down, how all of the neshama becomes part of this Torah mitzvahs experience via these three garments. So he says, the intellectual dimension of the neshama, which we already mentioned in Perek Gimel. Right? Remember, the neshama itself invests in the thought of Torah mitzvahs. So the whole Chabad shebenafshe. Remember, we said we did mention the neshama itself is. We just saying now the neshama has 613 parts to it. But how many parts to the neshama did we say exist within how many parts did we say exist within the neshama in the third chapter? We said 10, which are the 3 cognitive faculties and then the 7 emotional faculties, right? So when the person opens the Gemara and starts learning Gemara, so that Chabad, which was that intellect, until then it was intellectualizing godliness, it's wonderful. But it didn't understand the piece of Gemara yet. It didn't understand the Mishnah. It didn't understand Halacha. So it was separate from the energy which exists in the Halacha. Similar again to the neshama, which is in Gan Eden. I just go back to this Gan Eden because that's the easiest example to understand. The neshama has where does the neshama have a clear understanding in God? In Gan Eden or down here in this world? No comparison. Where does it touch God? Where does it connect to God? When it comes down to this world, it opens a Mishnayos or a Tanya and starts learning Torah. So the Chabad shebenefesh means the intellect, which we said before, when it comes milubashes, it puts on the garment of thought. Ba'asagas HaTorah, together with the thought, it's enabled to perceive Torah shumasik b'pardes, which is able to understand in the pshat remesh drusa sod of Torah kifi chayles hasagasi, according to its ability to understand v'sheidish nafshi l'mayla, also based on the source of its nefesh. Just to very briefly say what these words Sheiresh Nafsh L'mayla. We know there was example, the classic examples given Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel. When you deal with an argument in Torah, you have the house of Shammai and the house of Hillel, Yeshiva of Shammai, Yeshiva of Hillel, and across the whole Torah they're almost arguing. Not in every halacha, but you find, when you think about an argument in Torah, all the you have constant arguments in the Mishnah, right? The halacha ultimately like one. We know they're both godly opinions. It says Eilu ve'eilu divrei Elokim chaim. They're both godly opinions, but you could only perform one. You could only actualize, implement one of them. You can't implement more than one. So we do like one, like Beis Hillel. Most of the times halacha like Beis Hillel. But if you think about it, where did this begin? These bases for their arguments, Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel. It didn't begin and it was so clearly across the board. They said like this, and we find something very, very. You find it pretty clear cut. Beis Shammai was usually machmir, and Beis Hillel was usually mekel. In other words, they said they outruled. In other words, they distanced the for example, eating or puzzle, tamei. Today, something they said it's no good. They were more severe, or more they're more restricted. They placed many more restrictions. Beis Hillel was matir. They said it's okay, this is okay. Usually, in other words, it's not that they argued. Many times Beis Hillel permitted, and many times Beis Shammai permitted. You see across the board, with exceptions, few times throughout Shas, we know that Beis Hillel was machmir, and Beis Shammai was mekel, which means they were more lenient. On the overall, Beis Hillel were the ones who were lenient, and Beis Shammai were the ones who were more stringent. The question is why? Why was it so clear across the board? So it says in Chassidus, based on what it says in Kabbalah and Zayar, that the source of the neshama of Beis Shammai came or was more directed to the attribute of gvura of Hashem, of discipline, of severity, stringency. The source of this neshama Beis Hillel was associated with chesed, kindness. What's the connection? Because kindness says, give it a chance. You could elevate it. If that's that food, for example, when it comes to a piece of food, when Beis Shammai said it's not allowed to eat, Beis Hillel says you're allowed to eat, because they came, for the Sheiresh and Neshama was, the source of the Neshama was from Chesed, so they found within this piece of food the ability to be elevated. In other words, they demonstrated leniency, meaning we could elevate it. Matir means to say we could elevate it and we could serve Hashem with it. Beis Shammai, which they came from Gvura, which was again, Gvura is associated with discipline and being strict, they said no, you cannot find in that any way. In other words, with that you will never be able to, it cannot be elevated nor in the service of God. So they said no, Beis Hillel said yeah. So you see over here, one's learning Torah in this physical world has a lot to do with the source of their soul. And this is just a classic example which is given all along. It's black and white. Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel. The reason why their understanding of Torah was in this manner, because Beis Shammai, because of the source of the neshama where it came from. So Alter Rebbe adds over here that if you break it down, this concept exists with every single Yid. That when he learns Torah and you find two people learning the same piece of Gemara, this one will understand it like this, this one will understand it. They're not totally different. These great differences, we see it and to the extent of Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, but two people will learn the same things. Some will learn it like this, some like that, and they find it sometimes the same, or something more so. It says something very interesting. Something like the same Rishin, like Taisvus, the Rosh. They would write the same commentary. They would use these letters and they would use other letters, even though they're trying to convey the same idea. But yet, when you break down the letters, you can see there are actual differences in the message they want to convey based on the letters they chose. Why are they choosing these letters? Because there's association with learning the Torah we learn down here to the Sheiresh and Neshama, to the source. So the Alter Rebbe adds it over here because ultimately it does exist within every single Yid. So when we're dealing with the perception of Torah, which the Neshama precedes, it's not only kifi chelas asagasi, how much is it could perceive, but also the Sheiresh nafshi l'mayla, how the source of this particular nefesh, which is learning Torah down here in this world, to what level it's connected above, and that's the way it will learn Torah. But in conclusion, we will stop over here. But in conclusion, we see over here that the Chabad Shebenefesh in Perek Gimel, it wasn't connected yet to the learning of Torah. It didn't invest itself in machshava, in a structured thought of learning Torah. So it's very lofty and very holy, and it's only intellectualizes and godly. Its pursuit isn't godly in intellect. But yet it did not invest itself in the garment of machshava associated with Torah. Yet when it does, so the whole Chabad Shebenefesh, because that's the way we understand Torah, we understand with our intellect. So my Chabad, like my godly soul, invests in my thought, in that garment. I open the Mishnah, I understand what the Mishnah says. At that moment, not only my garment became close to God and became one with God, but my whole neshama, which is invested in my garment, together is connected to God. So it's not only the garments of the neshama is connected to God by Torah mitzvahs, the entire neshama. And again, we're going to say this one more time. Just like when you go, your garments are going with you. In this case, where the garments are going, in other words, when the investment via the garments, the whole neshama goes together with it. So that's what's the great virtue of the neshama, that it gets involved in the garments, and it doesn't stay away. Like someone says, what do I need a Torah? What do I need these small boxes to put on my hand? I want to be a spiritual person, and I just want to think about God, and I want to contemplate, and I want to ponder of this godly reality. You think he's lying? You think he's just one lazy, doesn't want to put on the tefillin? Not necessarily. Many people are so, I must say. Many people look over answers and think where they can get the easy way out. But many people are serious. God is a lofty idea. God, getting involved with God, it's some lofty experience. I'm emotionally attached to God. I want to wrap these boxes under my hand. If you think about it from a certain perspective, they have a point. But as much as they do have a point, it's similar to, like someone's going to say, where is the neshama closer to God, in Gan Eden or down here in this world? So we look in the Mishnah. The Mishnah says the pleasure, you're dealing with the pleasure, the experience. One moment in Gan Eden is greater than every pleasurable experience a person could ever imagine. An average person doesn't go through life without bumps. Everybody has their bumps, and there are different times when there's no. But theoretically, let's say someone live 120 years, only a pleasurable life. All his life, with all the pleasures, doesn't come to one moment of pleasure in Gan Eden. The same Mishnah says that one moment down here with Tshuva Ma'asim Tovim is greater than the whole pleasurable experience within Gan Eden. Why so? Because after all, where did the Eibishter invest in? He didn't invest his essence in Gan Eden. His essence he invested in Torah. So the same thing, the truth is, it could be, so theoretically it could be so. Prior to Hashem choosing those boxes that fill in, it made sense that I want to be connected to God on the spiritual level. In other words, with my inner faculties, my intellect and my emotions. These actions or the studying of the nuances of the Mishnah and the Gemara doesn't really matter to me. But once Hashem decided that He's putting His whole essence in that piece of Gemara, He's putting His whole essence in the Mishnah, and He's putting His whole essence in that parrot fill-in, in that little mezuzah, then the greatest virtue of the neshama is that it gets involved in those details, garments, it connects via the garments to those mitzvahs. And that's the way it connects to the essence of Hashem more than any experience it would ever experience without investing into the garments. Have a great night.